Hey folks, Quilly18 here, and welcome to Let's Make Some D&D Characters for Baldur's Gate 3. As I'm recording this, the full release of BG3 is just a few days away, and I'm super excited to play it. Just so you know, I will be streaming for 3 days. So August 3rd, which is a Thursday, I'm going to be live streaming over at twitch.tv/Quill18, Baldur's Gate 3 on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We're going to do 3 days in a row of BG3. I'm so excited for it. Those VODs will come up on YouTube as well. But if you want to, not miss the action, make sure to tune in for Baldur's Gate 3 itself. So what we're going to do here is we are still in the early access beta, but I want to make some characters. So there are 4 characters that I'm thinking I might like to play for the campaign. I'm not sure which one I'm going to choose. So if you want to weigh in, please do. Maybe you want to encourage me to play something that you yourself are going to play so we can see overlap in strategy. Maybe you want to see something completely different. Whatever you think might be cool, let me know. I have played in the early access, but I've intentionally avoided playing too much. I think the most I've gone into it is maybe a couple hours. I've visited the Tiefling village with the Druids. I've gone and bopped some goblins at a place. And that's kind of sort of it, because I really, as eager as I am to play Baldur's Gate 3, I really didn't want to burn out on the early game before we went in. Plus, I think it's quite fun to watch people play, semi-blind in here. So I've intentionally tried to avoid as much as possible. I haven't watched other people play. I've avoided most of the news and discussion about companions and things like that. I really want to go in blank slatey because I'm so freaking hyped about this game. So much. So the 4 characters that I'm planning on build are not necessarily meant to be like, oh, these are the 4 strongest characters or anything like that. Although we're going to try to make them as good as possible. These characters are based on things I want to play for a variety of different reasons. Starting off, so I've got 4 people planned. I'm going to go with them alphabetically based on what their character name is, which means we're going to start with Abigail. Abigail the Golden-Haired, Defender the Meek, Avenger the Downtrodden, and other wordy titles that she has assigned herself. She is a Paladin, which, that's sort of like haughtiness and self-righteousness that Paladins typically get, but it really does come from a good place with her, has always been the idea. She is a human Paladin. There you go. Again, I'm not picking the race class combinations because it is optimal or anything like that. Although I think that this works out quite well point wise. I'm not going to be complaining about anything we get left off with. So very quickly, I'll do the look. I might not do the look for all the characters, but I feel like with Abigail here, like the whole thing is a very much a vibe with her. So I took a screenshot of my previous work. So we got hair 18A, very appropriate to be hair 18. She is golden blonde. We've got this, and then I think I had done some work with some like makeup and things like that, but we'll just leave it like that. So that's generally what she's going to look like over here. In terms of origin, I'm giving her the soldier background just because of the skills, and it kind of fits. And we're going to talk about the skills after we look at the attributes over here. So as a paladin, she is a melee type character, so she will benefit indeed from relatively high strength. She will not really need any dexterity, and the reason for that is I will be planning on putting her in heavy armor and full plate type thing, and in 5th edition D&D, your dexterity does not factor into your armor class. I mean, obviously, dexterity still benefits for saving throws and things like that, but it means it's less important for her. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take, for a minute, I'm going to lower all these stats over here. I do want to put her charisma up to 16. Now, charisma is a stat that does play into some paladin stuff, but the big thing, and one of the reasons I'm thinking about playing Abigail here, the paladin, is a lot of times when I play an RPG, I really like it when my main character can be the face of the party, can be the one who is taking the lead in conversations, because my main character, it's their story, and so I like them when they can interact with things. And so I do quite like it when my main character that I build can be the one doing all the social stuff. So if we look over at the skills, with the soldier background, athletics does work out pretty nicely with someone who has high strength, so that we have a very high athletic skill, but the soldier also gives me intimidation. I can pair this with persuasion, and now all of a sudden I'm covering both types of primary social interactions, and in fact I can do insight as well by putting a point in there. Although right now the insight is only at a +1. The reason is we've got a -1 from wisdom, but we've got 4 extra points to spend. What do we do with it? Well, first of all, I could, and it may in fact be optimal, I don't know, put them into Constitution, bringing it from a 14 to a 16, increasing our Constitution modifier from a +2 to a +3. This will just mean primarily here more hit points per level. I'm not too worried about Constitution saving throw. And of course, we're not really going to be worried about concentration checks, I would think, as much with the Paladin. So we could do that. However, I think I'm much more interested in bringing this down because these points, you know, it's 2 points per, like it's 2 attribute ability points here per tick. So that's quite expensive. If we bring it down to a 14, we can spread a few more points around, in which case what I think I'd like to do is bring the dexterity to an even 10, so we don't have a penalty to our dexterity saving throws. And that will allow me to spend 3 points in the wisdom, going from a -1 modifier to a +1 modifier, which does mean our insight is now over at a +3. So again, really contributes to this idea of Abigail being the face of the party and really doing all the social interactions and having that sorted out. In terms of leveling plan, right, in terms of feats and things like that, I feel like there's a really good chance that with Abigail here, we would probably end up taking the +2 modifier at level 4, like when you get to pick a feat. Instead of picking a feat, probably just drop 2 more points in the strength is fairly tempting. Although there is stuff like, what is it called, like heavy armor mastery, which gives you some armor reduction. I think still gives you a +1 to strength, though that wouldn't do anything by itself. If there's another half feat that gives a +1 to strength, we could consider taking a half feat is a 5th edition parlance where, okay, sorry, let me back up. If you don't know, in 5th edition, every 4th level, you can choose a feat. Rather than choosing a feat, you can just choose to take +2 attribute points, which you can distribute anywhere you want. Generally, what you're looking to do is boost your most important primary attribute to the max, or they call it abilities over here, but stats, attributes, sort of mix and match, and potentially bringing it all the way up to a 20, for example. So that is very, very tempting because, I mean, if our most important thing that Abigail is doing is trying to bash people in melee, more strength equals better chance to hit and more damage. And so that might happen. At level 4, level 8, we might just add +2 to strength both times, bring her up to a strength of 20. But you can also just take a feat, which has a variety of different effects in the game, and some feats just give you some sort of extra bonus, and some feats are what have been nicknamed half feats, where what the feat itself gives you isn't that strong, but to compensate, they still give you +1 to a stat. And so that's something you can look at, especially if you end up with an odd number somewhere. It can be nice to take a half feat to equal it out, although we're not really going to be interested in doing that with intelligence. Abigail doesn't have as much book learning, but she sure as heck is very enthusiastic about spreading the good word of whatever god she might happen to worship. I suppose I haven't decided that. Maybe, you know, it's not even about a specific god so much as it is just the idea of, you know, being a righteous beacon of whatever. Now, I will note, I do know that there is a dark path for the Paladin. I don't think Abigail would take that route. I think a lot of people who are thinking about playing Paladin are excited about going the dark route, but I don't think that's what I would be doing with this particular character here. Although, who knows? Maybe the story will lead us in a different direction, depending on how things shake out. Let's look at character number 2, again, alphabetically, based on the name I was going to give them. The next character is BALDUR'S, which is a elven druid, and specifically here, I'm going to make him a wood elf for maximum flavor and druid. BALDUR'S it would be based on a character that I played in World of Warcraft for a long time. They were built to be a feral tank. BALDUR'S is kind of French for of the bear, so that's why I called them that, and the idea was that they were going to do some feral tanking. This was way back in Vanilla WoW, where feral druids were not considered to be very good, and yet I enjoyed them so much. And then as the expansion came out and the druid got a lot better, he became the character I played the most just because of his incredible flexibility with things. So yeah, we're taking Wood Elf over here because they do give +1 wisdom, which is important for the druid as a stat. Honestly, the +2 dexterity from the base elf part may not even be the most valuable thing in the universe for a druid, because if you're planning on spending a lot of time shapeshifted, your physical attributes, strength, dexterity, and constitution, take the stats of the shape you transform into. On the other hand, the dexterity bonus will help us when we are worried about having a better armor class when we are in sort of caster mode. In terms of abilities for BALDUR, let me just tab over to my next screenshot here. There we go. Let me just go and bring a bunch of these down so I've got some points to spend. And what we want to do is we do want to focus on wisdom as the primary stat. So just like clerics, druids are heavily dependent on wisdom. We can see a little star over here as kind of an important stat for that. Like I said, strength, dexterity, and constitution does get replaced when we are in animal form, but it's probably not a bad idea to have some value over here. In fact, I'd suspect that the optimal thing at this point is probably something You know, like maybe getting these up to 14, maybe even a 16 dexterity for better AC in caster mode. It's mostly going to depend on what kind of skills you might want to run. My plan for Delures, however, was something a little bit more conservative like this. Was going to keep the intelligence dumped. And again, I was going to put some points into charisma with the idea that he's my main character and I would like him to be fairly sociable. Again, definitely not picking this in terms of an optimization choice. We do have proficiency in stealth, which actually means more dexterity would benefit that stealth roll quite a bit more. Because we have low intelligence, I'm really not looking for the knowledge-based skills, right? With Delures here, it's not so much that he knows like the factual aspects of nature, but he knows the practical aspects, so animal handling and survival, for example. We do get perception built in from our race, which is wonderful. And in terms of origin, what was I giving him? That's a good question. I suspect I was going folk hero because I want animal handling and survival, although I was picking that from the class. So in my screenshot, I end up with stealth, which is from the race, animal handling, insight, perception from there, survival, and persuasion. Oh, I must have picked a background that gave him persuasion. Ah, maybe guild artisan. Yeah, I mean, flavor-wise, whether or not this really made sense with my story, I don't know. But I was picking it for the insight and persuasion boost. Because normally persuasion's not available. And again, I want to be able to be somewhat sociable over here. So yeah, I was picking animal handling and survival there, which leaves us strength, animal handling, insight, perception, survival, persuasion. Yeah, that matches exactly. In terms of spells, which would be under class over here, I don't think I specifically picked anything. I think you want Shillelagh or Thorn Whip. I mean, having both does give you both ranged and melee options, but it feels a little bit redundant. I think you kind of probably want the guidance in here so that you can get the ability check bonus in conversations and whatnot. And then after that, you probably pick an attack cantrip for when you're not in animal form. In which case, I'd probably want Thorn Whip, because the idea is use this to hit people at range, and if we're meleeing, then I'll probably turn into bear form later on. And in terms of prepared spells, here's an interesting thing. Now, I don't know how the balance of Cure Wounds versus Healing Words is going to work in Baldur's Gate 3. In tabletop D&D, it's actually, if you're a min-maxer, the thing you do is you take Healing Word and not bother with Cure Wounds. So Cure Wounds takes your whole action, right? And actions in combat are extremely valuable. Spending an action doing a Cure Wounds in combat instead of hitting someone is not really advancing you. Healing Word is quite nice though, because here's the thing. Healing Word is a bonus action, and yes, it doesn't heal as much. But the idea being is you don't bother healing anyone until they fall down, until they go down at all. Because people can't, there's no negative hit points in 5th edition, right? So you'd wait until they fell down, and then they're never below 0. And then you just Healing Word them, and it just gets them back up as a bonus action, and it's very, very action efficient in 5e. It's sort of a min-maxy kind of vibe. And then out of combat, well, hopefully you're doing a short rest and just using a hit dice to replenish yourself. In Baldur's Gate 3, I don't know if the balance is the same way, but I'd be kind of interested in the same sort of vibe. And then otherwise for spells, I'm not sure. Entangle, I don't know if there's any sort of friend or foe recognition. That would be interesting. You guys can let me know in the comments what you feel about that. Longstride is interesting because it does last until you rest, and it's not concentration based. I don't know. In the other Larian game, like Divinity Original Sin 2, there's kind of basically a feat, a perk you can take to let you speak with animals, and there's a lot of fun interactions with that in there. And I wonder if there might be some of that good stuff here in this game too. So I'm kind of tempted to pick up Speak with Animals for Delures here, just to see what's available. It might be worth having a damage spell, something like Thunderwave, just to give us some options in a particular situation. I don't know if I care about the animal friendship as much, especially since we have animal handling combined with Speak with Animals. That might be good enough. A charm might be really good. I'm normally kind of opposed to the save or suck or save or die spells, where if the enemy fails, you just win the combat. If the enemy doesn't fail, then you've just kind of wasted your whole turn. It feels bad to me, but there's no denying that Charm Person would probably be very powerful early on. Who knows, there might be some interesting sort of story and social situations for it too. Fairy Fire's fun. They do have a saving throw for advantage. Again, and concentration, yeah, I'm not sure. Good Berries is some efficient out-of-combat healing. To me, it partially depends on exactly how the micromanagement of these Good Berries go, so it's a little unappealing. So I'm not sure what spells I'd end up with. I think I'd be tempted to do something like this, and maybe a Charm Person. So it gives me a couple of kind of combat actions, but a lot of what Dell's probably going to do is focus on like fighting in his Werebear form, and then yeah, the healing word when someone drops down. So I don't know. I'm not 100% committed to this particular choice of spells, but probably something vaguely similar to that. All right, next up, character-wise, in alphabetical order based on their name, we are going to have Petra. So Petra is a Shield Dwarf fighter. Now, I don't tend to play a lot of fighters, like just plain sort of vanilla fighters, because, you know, are they going to be interesting enough? I don't know. But it is kind of tempting to do that. And part of the reason, well, this is a little bit similar to the Paladin idea, is one thing I like about having with my main character is having someone who can wield like all the biggest, baddest weapons and all the best armor, right? Having some token person in there like that. I think the idea with Petra as well, sort of similar to Abigail, is a lot of the other party members that I might put in. I'm not a keen on, what's her name, Lazale? Is she the Githyanki? Yeah, the Githyanki fighter that you meet right at the start. At least, again, I only played, you know, a couple hours into the early access. A few times I played, a few times a couple hours into it. But she never really vibed with me. So I thought if I'm not into, like, taking her with us, I could have my own sort of melee-type fighter to fulfill that role. And then we can bring, you know, Shadowheart as a cleric, and then Gale as a spellcaster, and then, you know, someone else to fill in the party, just to fill in those gaps. And so if I have that fighter, then it can fill those roles, and that might work out okay. And I like the idea of a dwarf named Petra. It feels pretty good that way. The stat situation is a lot simpler. So the Shield Dwarf is quite amazing because the Shield Dwarf gets +2 con and +2 strength, right? A really, really good template over here. And they get some great perks too. Dwarven Resilience is kind of nice for anti-poison stuff, which is really good. We're not worried about the armor proficiency because as a fighter, we're going to get those anyway. But yeah, that's pretty stonking good. If we're going to wear heavy armor, same thing with the Paladin. We don't really care about the dexterity score too much. That lets us boost our constitution up to a 17. Now, odd-numbered stats don't give us a benefit, right? But I don't think there was any way to get to an 18 right now. No, we're still capped, which makes sense. We can put up to 15, and then we get the +2. This means when we hit level 4, we take the +2 stats, and we put 1 to strength, 1 to constitution, bring those both up to an 18. Or we could consider a half feat to bring our strength up to 18 or something like that. In which case, maybe if we're planning to do that, so again, if something like armor mastery, I don't know what all the feats are in the released version. I read a few articles, but because not everything's released, I'm not 100% sure about exactly how locked in that is. So I don't know all the list of half feats, but presumably we could do something like that, and that frees up a few more points. And then what do we do with it? Well, I think I was thinking of putting some points in the wisdom because I was taking a lot of stats or a lot of skills that help with it. Animal handling is wisdom based. Survival is wisdom based. I was probably going to take athletics because I'm going to be the token strong person in the group, and then pick up perception, which is also wisdom based. So lots of wisdom based skills, and therefore I was thinking of putting a few more points into that. I was probably going to dump charisma in this case and hope that we picked up someone else in the party who could do it. And you can see we've got 2 points left over. And there's no real reason for me to put any points into intelligence. Still no real reason to put points into dexterity because I won't benefit from the AC side of it. There'll still be a saving throw, but I think that's the reason I ended up with, well, tell you what, I'll put it into constitution, and then when we hit level 4, I'll just bump both strength and con up to 18, and that'll feel pretty good. I think Petra's probably the person I'm least likely to play, although I think that this default look over here is very adorable and very appealing to play as a character. Last, but certainly not least, Quill. So Quill is a human wizard. Now, you'll notice, like, I've done human twice, and here's the reason. Human wizard. I feel like people go for in real D&D, physical, tabletop D&D. Everyone likes to play the freak races all the time, and so I feel like me being the token human, which happens a lot, tends to be a standout. The standout normal, right? I am the exceptional normal. But I do kind of like the in tabletop, the advanced human variant where you can pick and choose your stat points is quite nice. The version here and start with the extra feat, right? So there's two variants of humans that you can play in tabletop. The one in game here where you just get +1 to every ability is the default, but then the more advanced pick, you choose where you put, I think, 2 points, but then you do start a feat, and I do feel like the human is actually quite powerful. Yeah, they don't get dark vision, yada, whatever. I still think they're quite good. They're probably not quite as strong in this one. I think there's a lot of incentive. One of the stronger races, I think, is if you go tiefling with, either the Asmodeus or probably Asmodeus, because here you get the +1 intelligence. And again, if get that main character energy with the charisma, or you're playing a charisma-based class, right? But for a wizard, you get this. Hellish resistance is kind of nice. In general, we get our dark vision as well. And the Thaumaturgy cantrip is actually really cool to gain advantage on intimidation or performance checks, but mostly I think the intimidation kind of vibe. But I think I'm just naturally opposed to playing tieflings because it feels like lots of people play tieflings. And yeah, I know, I'm like, am I a freaking, am I too hipster? I don't want to do it because everyone is doing it. Maybe that's possible. I'm not gonna lie. That could be the case. In terms of stats here for Quill the Wizard, actually we can use recommended to shortcut a few things. The most important thing, of course, is intelligence, because that is the wizard's primary stat. I think for this particular character, I was thinking of dumping charisma, and instead investing quite heavily in constitution and dexterity. So we're going to do the full min-max where we drop everything down to a 9. So again, it would be an 8, but +1 to everything because you're a human. And then we get to start with a 16 in dexterity, constitution, and intelligence. Intelligence for the spell casting, constitution for hit points, but also concentration saving, or concentration checks, which is pretty good. And then dexterity for lots of AC, plus... most of that would be it, I suppose. In terms of skills, I was thinking... I can't remember what my background was for this character. Yeah, I don't remember. But I ended up... My plan was to cover the intelligence-based things. So, Arcana, History, Investigation, and Religion. I think the easiest way to do that was to take... not Acolyte, but Sage. Yeah. Because Sage gives us Arcana and History, and yes, those are class skills already. But yeah, then we get Investigation and Religion. So these are all intelligence-based skills, so we get to max out around there and just provide that utility for the party. Spells for the wizard is actually the most sort of interesting and tricksy to me. So cantrip-wise, I probably want a spammable damage spell. Firebolt does the most damage, so it's kind of appealing that way, plus fire tends to feel very... classically wizardy. The Mage Hand here is... I don't know what Mage Hand get used for in Baldur's Gate 3 here. But in tabletop, it's just provides so much utility. You always want this kind of thing if you can. Maybe an Unseen Servant, but Mage Hand as a cantrip is really, really sexy. It only got better with the introduction of the infinite times per day cantrip casting with 4th edition and then 5th edition. Right, if you go back to 3rd edition, cantrips were slots. Although in our tabletop game, when we play 3rd edition, 3.5 edition, we actually house ruled that cantrips are unlimited castings per day, which only requires us to change... I think there's a clerical spell, the cantrip, that heals 1 HP, so all we have to do is ban that one so that you can't just get infinite healing from it. Otherwise, it works perfectly well, going back to 3rd ed and just saying cantrips are unlimited. Works really good. And then after that, I don't know. I think I was considering Dancing Lights here so that we have the ability to just summon some illumination. There's also, of course, the Light Spell. I'm not sure what the 3rd slot's going to be, but I kind of like that as a thing. Now, the actual first level spells, as opposed to cantrips, is so interesting. I feel like there's a lot of potential for utility spells for the wizard here. Mage Armor, obviously, pretty appealing. This gives us actual armor if we go and... expand this here. AC is 13 plus dexterity modifier seems like a pretty good idea. Maybe we end up with mage robes or something later on that gives us a basic AC, like you would see in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, for example, in which case the armor spell won't be as required. But for now, that seems like a pretty straightforward pick. After that, I was thinking of Disguise Self. I have no idea what Disguise Self does for us in Baldur's Gate 3, but it is such a great utility spell in tabletop that I always want to pick it because it always seems to be something that you can do with it, which is great. False Life is tempting. Now, between False Life and Armor, I mean, those are two spells that we'd want to pretty much pre-cast until, yeah, like, before we do anything else. But this extra 7 temp HP is a huge amount of extra HP early on, and I would not mind as a player to just like cast those and just go cantrips for the rest of the day rather than do anything else. So I don't know. Featherfall, again, I'm not sure how much it plays in with Baldur's Gate 3. From a tabletop perspective, I would always want Featherfall because, you know, you're in case of emergency button. I feel like it's probably unlikely to be as useful here in BG3, unless there's a bunch of scripted stuff. So it feels like I would have a hard time not picking it just because in my brain it's so important in tabletop. But I would be very surprised if it proves to be to have a lot of utility in Baldur's Gate 3. But I don't know, it's in here, so they must be thinking about it, right? And then after that, I probably want to look at some damage spells. I gotta say, Chromatic Orb does more damage, but it's got a 2-hit roll. So I might probably take Magic Missile just because they always hit. They never miss, and that feels pretty good. And then I might want something like Burning Hands. There's going to be a lot of times where it's not viable as a target, but because in 5th edition, we're not using memorized spells from where I have to specifically memorize, well, I'm going to memorize 2 copies of Burning Hands for the day, right? This is just like a wild card that I can call upon these. Well, I still have to prepare some, obviously, but I get to pick and choose for the day what I might consider. So I can either spend a spell slot on a Magic Missile or Burning Hands. So having Burning Hands prepared isn't necessarily a waste because it's available in a sort of wild card situation. If I don't pick Featherfall, I don't know. Charm Person... Find Familiar, maybe? I mean, I guess I could just learn this, cast it once, have a Familiar. I don't know how good or bad they are in Baldur's Gate 3. A lot of times I don't want to bother with that kind of micromanagement. Yeah. Witchbolt does do a crap ton of damage if it lands. It's pretty ridiculous, but yeah. And then in terms of memorization, like for the day, right, what I'd probably consider is like, you get your Mage Armor, you get your False Life, and on a normal day, I might be packing these 2 combat spells. But then on a case-for-case situation, I have the option of memorizing or preparing Disguise Self or Featherfall if it turns out it's a situation where it could pay off. But I suspect we'd end up with something like that. So right now, those are the 4 characters I'm considering playing. Who knows? Come Thursday, I might just decide, oh, I'm playing a sorcerer or something like that. I don't know. Oh, one of the reasons I decided I thought about playing a wizard is because when I did play the early access, I didn't really like Gale. Right? Gale is the wizard. Right? And he didn't really vibe for me. So, yeah, I don't know. I was going to give myself some sort of young Quill look here with like long hair. I used to have long hair all the time. I think part of me still kind of vaguely misses it. I was going to do something kind of like this. I mean, that doesn't look like me at all, but sometimes I miss my long hair. I usually hate when my hair gets long these days just because my head gets too hot and it gets in the way. It's too much maintenance. But I did look pretty good with my long hair. So I was thinking I might go with a look kind of like this for Quill. So yeah, I don't know. The reason I prepared the wizard was to maybe replace Gale. Delurs is one of my favorite all-time characters in any game. Specifically, I played him in World of Warcraft, but it's someone I quite like. And I like the Druid mechanics a lot. But there's something I'd say very appealing about the idea of playing Abigail finally. This character that I've designed for multiple versions of D&D over the years, never really played her. One of the things that's appealing about playing the Paladin as well is you kind of will have a strong sense of what your character would do in various situations as they come up. You know, we're going to follow this code, we're going to play it this way, so we don't have to hem and haw too much about things. And that will probably also lead us to decisions that are that might not necessarily be optimal or whatever, but will lead the story in a certain direction. And then I think part of me was wondering, I was like thinking, okay, well, if I play Abigail for the first playthrough, and let's say I want to play a character with differing sensibilities, well, it might be Quill for a second playthrough as a wizard who's more interested in power and more interested in the darker path that is available with the Illithids that I've only seen hinted about and didn't want to spoil myself on, but I'm like, okay, there's some sort of more evil, darker path, which is quite tempting, I would say, and could be path B. I suppose the other thing, rather than a wizard, could be something like a sorcerer, right? Because with the sorcerer, we are charisma based for our abilities, and then that does tie in nicely to the idea of like, well, your main character is the face of the character, or the face of the party, but then still gets to do spell casting stuff, and so maybe I'd end up doing a sorcerer, or the, you know, depending on how dark I want to go, you go warlock kind of vibe too, which would be another charisma based character, and that might be a vibe. And I've heard they with the warlock, the Pact of the Blade, they're building in the Hexblade thing of being able to use charisma for your attack rolls, which honestly should have always been in the game, and that does make that kind of vibe very appealing. I'm not considering Cleric. I love the Cleric class, and I played a lot of Clerics. Part of the reason I'm not considering Cleric at this time is because Shadowheart actually seems quite cool, and so I think I'm going to want her in my party. That seems pretty straightforward. I've played some fun runs as rogues. My favorite my favorite Dragon Age, the original Dragon Age run, was as a human noble rogue, and I really, really enjoyed that run a lot. But yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you're going to be playing as in your first go, and you know what might be more interesting to watch. You think? I'm very curious. Oh, and if I missed something obvious, if you can want to weigh in, especially like maybe the spell selection, or if you want to say, listen, such and such a skill is really key. Of course, not every character can get every skill as a class, as a skill, right? Because first of all, there's a limit to your class skills, and then not everything is available as a background. None of the backgrounds give you perception. And I think perception, generally speaking, D&D, I want all my characters to be proficient in perception, but that's not going to be the case here in Baldur's Gate 3, and maybe it'll turn out it's not that important. Who knows? Thanks for watching, folks. I will see you, I'm going to see you on Thursday, August 3rd, again at twitch.tv/Quill18. See you there. Bye-bye.